2.1 The Story of Gopika. Right here in Kapilavatthu, there was a Sakyan lady named Gopika who had confidence in the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha, and had fulfilled her ethics. This implies she was a stream enterer. Losing her attachment to femininity, she developed masculinity. When her body broke up, after death, she was reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. In Buddhism, sex is mutable between lives, and even within one life. Bujay 1.10.6.1. Later Buddhists sometimes held that the status of a male was preferable. Here this is not stated outright, but the narrative implies that she thought her station was improved when becoming a male. Notably, it is not the Buddha who says this, but Sakka, relaying the story of another deity. That the proponent was a woman, at least formally, is a trope of Indian literature. A woman is the ideal misogynist, see e.g. Jar 61, or Shiva Purana chapter 4. Here, though, the situation is nuanced, because despite her presumed inferior status, she has better rebirth than the monks she served. In the company of the gods of the 33, she became one of my sons. There they knew him as the godling Gopaka. Meanwhile, 3 others, mendicants who had led the spiritual life under the Buddha, were reborn in the inferior centaur realm. The realm of centaurs is inferior because the centaurs are known for their ribald sexuality. There, they amused themselves, supplied and provided with the 5 kinds of sensual stimulation, and became my servants and attendants. At that, Gopaka scolded them. "Where on earth were you at, good fellows, when you heard the Buddha's teaching?" Kutamukha, which occurs only in this sutta, contrasts with samukha, in the presence of, from the mouth of. The commentary explains it as a rhetorical question. Were you distracted or falling asleep? Alternatively, it might mean, from whom did you learn the Buddha's teaching? It recurs later in the verses. This is not the only such case. Dudet Tharupam and Kayam Brahmapurohitam are other examples of terms found nowhere else in the Pali Canon, yet found here both in prose and in verse. Clearly one has been copied from the other. It seems to me that the rarity of these terms and the greater coherence of the verses suggests that the prose is a somewhat altered summary of the verses. For while I was still a woman, I had confidence in the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha, and had fulfilled my ethics. I lost my attachment to femininity and developed masculinity. When my body broke up, after death, I was reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. In the company of the gods of the 33, I became one of Sakka's sons. Here they know me as the godling Gopaka. But you, having led the spiritual life under the Buddha, were reborn in the inferior centaur realm. It is a sad sight indeed to see fellow practitioners reborn in the inferior centaur realm. When scolded by Gopaka, 2 of those gods regained their memory right away. They went to the host of the priests of divinity, but one god remained attached to sensual pleasures. The commentary explains the verb gained, patilabhimsu, as serving dual roles here, gaining of absorption mindfulness, jhanasatim, upon which they gain rebirth in the Brahma realm. However, the verses below speak of recollecting, anusaram, the Buddha's teachings at this juncture. Compare Bu NP 23, verse 1.20, where the king remembered his long-forgotten promise, Visaritva Sirena Satim Patilabhitva. And 4.191 2.24 speaks of the arising of memory, Satapado, in a deity when reminded of Dhamma passages they once recited as a monk. The phrase Kayam Brahmapurohitam is syntactically incongruous. I think it was clumsily copied from the verses below, where the required verb ajahagamsu is present. The commentary explains it as a minister of Brahma's body, Brahmapurohita Sariram, but in such contexts, Kaya usually means host. I was a laywoman disciple of the clear-eyed one, and my name was Gopika. I was devoted to the Buddha and the teaching, and I faithfully served the Sangha. Because of the clear rightness of the Buddha's teaching, I'm now a mighty, dazzling son of Sakka, reborn in the 3rd heaven. And here they know me as Gopaka. Then I saw some mendicants who I'd seen before, dwelling in the host of centaurs. They were disciples of Gautama when I used to be a human. I served them with food and drink, and clasped their feet in my own home. When bowing, it is a special sign of devotion to touch the feet of the one revered, e.g. M 89 9.1. Where on earth were these good fellows at when they learned the Buddha's teachings? For each must know for themselves the teaching so well taught, realized by the clear-eyed one. I was one who followed you. Here Gopaka shifts from speaking about them in third person to speaking to them in second person, having heard the fine words of the noble ones. I'm now a mighty, dazzling son of Sakka, reborn in the third heaven. But you followed the best of men and led the supreme spiritual life, but still you're born in this lesser realm, a rebirth unbefitting. It's a sad sight I see, good fellows, fellow practitioners in a lesser realm, reborn in the host of centaurs, only to wait upon the gods. Meanwhile, I dwelt in a house, i.e., she was a layperson. But see my distinction now. Having been a woman now, I'm a male god, blessed with heavenly sensual pleasures. Scolded by that disciple of Gautama, up until now, the verses have been spoken by Gopaka, but here a narrator appears. Comprehending Gopaka, they were struck with urgency. Let's strive, let's try hard, we won't serve others any more. Two of them roused up energy, recalling the Buddha's instructions. Right away they became dispassionate, seeing the drawbacks in sensual pleasures, the fetters and bonds of sensual pleasures. The ties of the wicked one so hard to break, they burst them like a bull elephant his ropes, and passed right over the 33. The gods with Indra and the progenitor were all gathered in the hall of clear right. As they sat there, they passed over them, the heroes desireless, practicing purity. Seeing them, Vasava was struck with urgency. Normally rebirth is described as passing away in one realm, then being reborn in another. Yet here the gods of the 33, in their traditional abode on Mount Meru, were watching them literally fly from one realm to another. The Master of Gods, in the midst of the group, said, "These were born in the lesser centaur realm, but now they pass us by." Heeding the speech of one so moved, Gopaka addressed Vasava. There is a Buddha, a lord of men, in the world. The truncated Janind is not vocative Janinda for Sakka, but nominative Janindo for the Buddha. Known as the Sakyan sage, he's mastered the senses. Sakyan sage, Sakyamuni, became a favorite epithet of the Buddha, but in early texts it appears only here and the Ratana Sutta, 2.1.4.2. Those sons of his lost their memory, sons in a spiritual sense, but when scolded by me they gained it back. Of the three, there is one who remains dwelling in the host of centaurs, but two, recollecting the path to awakening, serene, spurn even the gods. Such is the explanation of the teaching here. The commentary says, in this dispensation the explanation of the teaching is such that, because of it, disciples become endowed with such qualities. Ethasane evarupa dhammapakasana, yaya savaka etehi gunehi samanagata honti. This explains the feminine etadasi. Pakasana, which is normally neuter, is feminine here. This use is fairly common in later texts. It occurs at the conclusion of the tika for this sutta. Not a single disciple doubts that. Kinkankati is a unique term for doubt. We venerate the Buddha, the victor, Lord of men, who has crossed the flood and cut off doubt. They attained distinction to the extent they understood the teaching here, two of them distinguished in the host of the priests of divinity. The end point of Gopaka's speech is hard to determine, as there is no T to mark it. Various editions and translations either ignore the issue or end it in different places. The next line marks the beginning of Sakka's direct speech to the Buddha, and I think it makes the best sense to assume that up to here he has been relating the story he was told. We have come here, dear sir, to realize this same teaching. If the Buddha would give me a chance, I would ask a question, dear sir. Then it occurred to the Buddha. For a long time now, this spirit has led a pure life. Any question he asks me will be beneficial, not unbeneficial, and he will quickly understand any answer I give to his question. So the Buddha addressed Sakka in verse. Ask me your question, Vasava, whatever you want. I'll solve each and every question you have. The first recitation section is finished. Having been granted an opportunity by the Buddha, Sakka asked the first question. Good fellow, what fetters bind the gods, humans, titans, dragons, centaurs, and any of the other diverse creatures, so that though they wish to be free of enmity, violence, hostility, and hate, they still have enmity, violence, hostility, and hate? This question hints at Sakka's own evolution from the battle god of the Vedas to an acolyte of peace. Such was Sakka's question to the Buddha, and the Buddha answered him, Lord of gods, The fetters of jealousy and stinginess bind the gods, humans, titans, dragons, centaurs, and any of the other diverse creatures. Jealousy is wanting what others have, while stinginess is not wanting to share what you have. So that, though they wish to be free of enmity, violence, hostility, and hate, they still have enmity, violence, hostility, and hate. Such was the Buddha's answer to Sakka. Delighted, Sakka approved and agreed with what the Buddha said, saying, "That's so true, Blessed One. That's so true, Holy One. Hearing the Buddha's answer, I've gone beyond doubt and got rid of indecision." And then, having approved and agreed with what the Buddha said, Sakka asked another question. "But good fellow, what is the source, origin, birthplace, and inception of jealousy and stinginess? Compare with the side branch of dependent origination at DN 15.9.1, the origins of disputes at SNEP 4.11, and the analysis of proliferation at MN 18. Note the constructive use of the yes and method of questioning. Sakka finds wisdom due to his curiosity, neither being too easily sated with a simple answer, nor quibbling that the answer is inadequate, but building on the foundations of understanding. When what exists, is there jealousy and stinginess? When what doesn't exist, is there no jealousy and stinginess? The liked and the disliked, Lord of Gods, are the source of jealousy and stinginess. When the liked and the disliked exist, there is jealousy and stinginess. When the liked and the disliked don't exist, there is no jealousy and stinginess. But good fellow, what is the source of what is liked and disliked? Desire is the source of what is liked and disliked. Compare SNEP 4.11 4.1. But what is the source of desire? Thought is the source of desire. Here we depart from the normal sequence, which is that feelings give rise to craving, tanha. In 4.6.1, it is said that pleasure and pain give rise to desire, not thought. But what is the source of thought? Judgments driven by the proliferation of perceptions are the source of thoughts. Judgments that emerge from the proliferation of perceptions renders papanka sanyasanka. Again, the sequence departs from MN 18.16.1, which says that thoughts, which are normal and morally neutral psychological processes, give rise to proliferation, papanka, which is when craving and delusion cause thought to spin out of control. Proliferation then solidifies into judgments that fuel an individual's delusion of self persisting through time. But how does a mendicant fittingly practice for the cessation of judgments driven by the proliferation of perceptions? 2.2. Meditation on feelings. Lord of Gods, there are two kinds of happiness, I say, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. There are two kinds of sadness, I say, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. There are two kinds of equanimity, I say, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. Why did I say that there are two kinds of happiness? Well, should you know of a happiness, Janya is third singular optative, CP 9.6 3.4. When I cultivate this kind of happiness, unskillful qualities grow and skillful qualities decline. You should not cultivate that kind of happiness. Whereas, should you know of a happiness, when I cultivate this kind of happiness, unskillful qualities decline and skillful qualities grow. You should cultivate that kind of happiness. And that which is free of placing the mind and keeping it connected is better than that which still involves placing the mind and keeping it connected. That is, second jhana is better than first jhana. That's why I said there are two kinds of happiness. Why did I say that there are two kinds of sadness? Well, should you know of a sadness, when I cultivate this kind of sadness, unskillful qualities grow and skillful qualities decline. You should not cultivate that kind of sadness. Whereas, should you know of a sadness, when I cultivate this kind of sadness, unskillful qualities decline and skillful qualities grow. You should cultivate that kind of sadness. Overwhelmingly, the suttas speak of happiness in the path to liberation. They do, however, also acknowledge that sometimes temporary states of sadness leading to disillusionment can spur a person on the path. And that which is free of placing the mind and keeping it connected is better than that which still involves placing the mind and keeping it connected. It is hard to know what the text is getting at here, as there is no sadness in any jhana. That's why I said there are two kinds of sadness. Why did I say that there are two kinds of equanimity? Well, should you know of an equanimity? When I cultivate this kind of equanimity, unskillful qualities grow, and skillful qualities decline. You should not cultivate that kind of equanimity. Whereas, should you know of an equanimity, when I cultivate this kind of equanimity, unskillful qualities decline and skillful qualities grow. You should cultivate that kind of equanimity. And that which is free of placing the mind and keeping it connected is better than that which still involves placing the mind and keeping it connected. That's why I said there are two kinds of equanimity. That's how a mendicant fittingly practices for the cessation of judgments driven by the proliferation of perceptions. Such was the Buddha's answer to Sakka. Delighted, Sakka approved and agreed with what the Buddha said, saying, "That's so true, Blessed One. That's so true, Holy One." Hearing the Buddha's answer, I've gone beyond doubt and got rid of indecision. 2.3. Restraint in the monastic code. And then Sakka asked another question. But good fellow, how does a mendicant practice for restraint in the monastic code? Lord of gods, I say that there are two kinds of bodily behavior. Here the Buddha emphasizes the psychological and spiritual underpinnings of the monastic code, patimokkha, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. I say that there are two kinds of verbal behavior, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. There are two kinds of search, I say, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. Why did I say that there are two kinds of bodily behavior? Well, should you know of a bodily conduct? When I cultivate this kind of bodily conduct, unskillful qualities grow and skillful qualities decline. You should not cultivate that kind of bodily conduct. Whereas, should you know of a bodily conduct, when I cultivate this kind of bodily conduct, unskillful qualities decline and skillful qualities grow. You should cultivate that kind of bodily conduct. That's why I said there are two kinds of bodily behavior. Why did I say that there are two kinds of verbal behavior? Well, should you know of a kind of verbal behavior that it causes unskillful qualities to grow while skillful qualities decline, you should not cultivate it. Whereas, should you know of a kind of verbal behavior that it causes unskillful qualities to decline while skillful qualities grow, you should cultivate it. That's why I said there are two kinds of verbal behavior. Why did I say that there are two kinds of search? Well, should you know of a kind of search that it causes unskillful qualities to grow while skillful qualities decline, you should not cultivate it. The suttas frequently describe three kinds of search: for sensual pleasures, for continued existence, and for a spiritual path. SN 45.161 7.3. The last search led the Buddha to awakening. MN 26:15.1. Whereas, should you know of a kind of search that it causes unskillful qualities to decline while skillful qualities grow, you should cultivate it. That's why I said there are two kinds of search. That's how a mendicant practices for restraint in the monastic code. Such was the Buddha's answer to Sakka. Delighted, Sakka approved and agreed with what the Buddha said, saying, "That's so true, Blessed One. That's so true, Holy One." Hearing the Buddha's answer, I've gone beyond doubt and got rid of indecision. 2.4. Sense restraint. And then Sakka asked another question. But good fellow, how does a mendicant practice for restraint of the sense faculties? Lord of gods, I say that there are two kinds of sight known by the eye, that which you should cultivate, and that which you should not cultivate. There are two kinds of sound known by the ear, smells known by the nose, tastes known by the tongue, touches known by the body, ideas known by the mind, that which you should cultivate and that which you should not cultivate. When the Buddha said this, Sakka said to him, "Sir, this is how I understand the detailed meaning of the Buddha's brief statement." Sakka switches his term of address for the Buddha from Marisa to the more respectful Bhante, here, then back to Marisa below. This passage is found at MN 140 verse 24.5, where Bhante is used, suggesting it was imported from there. You should not cultivate the kind of sight known by the eye, which causes unskillful qualities to grow, while skillful qualities decline. For a more detailed analysis of this, see MN 152. And you should cultivate the kind of sight known by the eye, which causes unskillful qualities to decline, while skillful qualities grow. You should not cultivate the kind of sound, smell, taste, touch, or idea known by the mind, which causes unskillful qualities to grow, while skillful qualities decline. And you should cultivate the kind of idea known by the mind, which causes unskillful qualities to decline, while skillful qualities grow. Sir, that's how I understand the detailed meaning of the Buddha's brief statement. Hearing the Buddha's answer, I've gone beyond doubt and got rid of indecision. And then Sakka asked another question. Good fellow, do all ascetics and Brahmins have a single doctrine, ethics, desire, and attachment? The palicanon, single, here is a little tricky. It could mean either the same or of one goal. The Sanskrit has just eka kachanda, one desire, one wish, while the commentary explains the first and last terms as one goal and the middle terms as one. No, Lord of Gods, they do not. Why not? The world has many and diverse elements. Whatever element sentient beings insist on in this world of many and diverse elements, they obstinately stick to it, insisting that the Buddha points out that spiritual teachers, when faced with a world of experiential diversity, tend to prioritize their own experience or doctrine, dismissing others as less real or meaningful. This is the only truth. Anything else is futile. That's why not all ascetics and Brahmins have a single doctrine, ethics, desire, and attachment. Good fellow, have all ascetics and Brahmins reached the ultimate end, the ultimate sanctuary from the yoke, the ultimate spiritual life, the ultimate goal? Yoga kamma, sanctuary from the yoke, is a metaphor for nibbana that draws from the literal sense of kamma as an oasis or sanctuary for men and beasts. After a hard day's journey, a caravan would stop to rest, unyoke the draft animals, lay down the burden, and refresh themselves in the cool waters. No, Lord of Gods, they have not. Why not? Those mendicants who are freed through the ending of craving have reached the ultimate end, the ultimate sanctuary from the yoke, the ultimate spiritual life, the ultimate goal. This passage is quoted by name by Haladakani at SN 22.41.4. The topic is picked up again in MN 31, where we see the extent to which Sakka has learned his lesson. The text has mendicants here, but ascetics and Brahmins immediately before and after. The quotation at SN 22.41.4 has ascetics and Brahmins, so it is likely the text here is in error. That's why not all ascetics and Brahmins have reached the ultimate end, the ultimate sanctuary from the yoke, the ultimate spiritual life, the ultimate goal. Such was the Buddha's answer to Sakka. Delighted, Sakka approved and agreed with what the Buddha said, saying, "That's so true, Blessed One. That's so true, Holy One. Hearing the Buddha's answer, I've gone beyond doubt and got rid of indecision." This is the final substantive question of the series. It is picked up in MN 37 2.2, where Sakka, in a subsequent visit, inquires further as to the nature of those who have realized the ultimate goal. And then Sakka, having approved and agreed with what the Buddha said to him, "Turbulence, sir, is a disease, a boil, a dart. Turbulence drags a person to be regenerated in one state of existence or another. Turbulence is eja, from a root meaning motion, agitation, and hence the opposite of the imperturbable aneja, peace of the Buddha, SN 35.90. That's why a person finds themselves in states high and low. Elsewhere, among other ascetics and Brahmins, I wasn't even given a chance to ask these questions that the Buddha has answered. The dart of doubt and indecision has lain within me for a long time, but the Buddha has plucked it out. Lord of Gods, do you recall having asked this question of other ascetics and Brahmins? Compare Ajatasattu's experience at DN2 15.1. I do, sir. If you wouldn't mind, Lord of Gods, tell me how they answered. It's no trouble when someone such as the Blessed One is sitting here. Well, speak then, Lord of Gods. Sir, I approached those who I imagined were ascetics and Brahmins living in the wilderness, in remote lodgings, but they were stumped by my question, and they even questioned me in return. What is the Venerable's name? So I answered them, "Good fellow, I am Sakka, Lord of Gods." So they asked me another question, "But Lord of Gods, what deed brought you to this position?" So I taught them the Dhamma as I had learned and memorized it. And they were pleased with just that much. "We have seen Sakka, Lord of Gods, and he answered our questions." Invariably, they become my disciples. I don't become theirs. But sir, I am the Buddha's disciple, a stream enterer, not liable to be reborn in the underworld, destined for awakening. 2.5. On feeling happy. Lord of gods, do you recall ever feeling such joy and happiness before? I do, sir. But how? Once upon a time, sir, a battle was fought between the gods and the titans. In that battle, the gods won and the titans lost. It occurred to me as victor, now the gods shall enjoy both the nectar of the gods and the nectar of the titans. Nectar is oja, in Vedic texts called soma or amrita, ambrosia of immortality. The battle over nectar by gods Deva and demons Asura is a very ancient element of Indo-European mythology. But sir, that joy and happiness is in the sphere of the rod and the sword. It doesn't lead to disillusionment, dispassion, cessation, peace, insight, awakening, and extinguishment. But the joy and happiness I feel listening to the Buddha's teaching is not in the sphere of the rod and the sword. It does lead to disillusionment, dispassion, cessation, peace, insight, awakening, and extinguishment. Here Sakka makes a clean break from the violent delights he enjoyed in former Vedic times. But Lord of gods, what reason do you see for speaking of such joy and happiness? I see 6 reasons to speak of such joy and happiness, sir. While staying right here, remaining in the godly form, I have gained an extended life. Punarayu is a unique term. It probably means that Sakka can extend his current fortunate birth due to the merit of Dhamma. Know this, dear sir. This is the first reason. When I fall from the heavenly host, leaving behind the non-human life, I shall consciously go to a new womb. To die unconfused or consciously is said to be a benefit of Dhamma practice, e.g. and 5.215 2.3, wherever my mind delights. This is the second reason. Living happily under the guidance of the one of unclouded wisdom, I shall practice systematically. According to method, Nyayana recalls Nyayapatipanno as a description of the noble ones. It means practicing according with the Noble Eightfold Path, a method that yields definite results. Aware and mindful. This is the third reason. And if awakening should arise as I practice systematically, I shall live as one who understands, and my end shall come right there. This refers to the possibility of achieving perfection, arahata. This is the fourth reason. When I fall from the human realm, leaving behind the human life, I shall become a god again, supreme in the heaven realm. That is, after passing away as Sakka and being reborn as a human, he will subsequently return to the heaven realm. This is the fifth reason. They are the finest of gods, the glorious Akanithas. So long as my final life goes on, he predicts that his final life will be in this high realm that is inhabited by non-returners, A 9.12, 6.7. There my home will be. This is the sixth reason. Seeing these 6 reasons, I speak of such joy and happiness. My wishes unfulfilled, doubting and indecisive, I wandered for such a long time, in search of the realized one. I imagined that ascetics living in seclusion must surely be awakened, so I went to sit near them. How is their success? How is their failure? But they were stumped by such questions about the path and practice. And when they found out that I was Sakka, come from the gods, they questioned me instead about the deed that brought me to this state. I taught them the Dhamma as I had learned it among men. They were delighted with that, saying, "We've seen Vasava." Now since I've seen the Buddha, who helps us overcome doubt, today, free of fear, I pay homage to the awakened one. Destroyer of the dart of craving, the Buddha is unrivaled. I bow to the great hero, the Buddha, kinsman of the sun. In the same way that divinity ought be revered, karamasi is middle imperative first plural, we should do, glossed by the commentary as, we should pay homage, namakaram karoma. By we gods, dear sir, samam is an indeclinable in the sense likewise. Today we shall revere you. Come, let us revere you ourselves. Samam is an indeclinable in the sense, oneself, personally, one's own. You alone are the awakened. You are the teacher supreme. In the world with its gods, you have no rival. Then Sakka addressed the centaur Panchasika. Dear Panchasika, you were very helpful to me since you first charmed the Buddha, after which I went to see him. I shall appoint you to your father's position. You shall be king of the centaurs, and I give you Bhadasuriya Vachasa, for she loves you very much. A Gandharva wedding must be a mutual love match. Then Sakka, touching the ground with his hand, expressed this heartfelt sentiment 3 times. Touching the ground with his hand is a unique gesture in the early Pali, immortalized in later legend when the Buddha touches the ground to invoke the earth goddess as witness of his striving. Homage to him, the blessed one, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha. Homage to him, the blessed one, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha. Homage to him, the blessed one, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha. And while this discourse was being spoken, the stainless, immaculate vision of the Dhamma arose in Sakka, Lord of Gods. Everything that has a beginning has an end. And also for another 80,000 deities. Sakka is also said to have been accompanied by 80,000 deities at SN 40.10, 4.4. This is one of many indications that this is a late discourse, several of which have been touched on above. Late or unique terminology, fancy literary styles, adoption of doctrinal passages from elsewhere in a sometimes clumsy fashion, and so on. In determining whether a sutta is late or early, we do not rely on a single definitive reason, but on a cluster of independent criteria which, taken together, are most easily explained in terms of historical development. Such were the questions Sakka was invited to ask, and which were answered by the Buddha. And that's why the name of this discussion is Sakka's Questions.